New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring. And hello again, dear ones. Dr. Robert with you over here.
Rev Z right here.
And this is New Thought today for February 13th, 2024. You know, I heard it said earlier today, Z, I love a God that has a sense of humor because somehow tomorrow is Ash Wednesday and Valentine's Day all at the same time.
So, oh, boy.
Anybody think about giving up chocolate for Lent, it might be in trouble.
Yeah, you have to see if you can get a pause for one day.
I'll start that tomorrow. Yeah, midnight.
Yeah.
12:01 we'll start. So, hello everybody. Thanks for being with us. I've been off for a couple of weeks. Rev Z has been holding down the fort. Thank you for that, my brother. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
And so we came back today thinking, all right, what are we going to talk about? I forgot to mention, I did want to let Reverend LZ know we are now, this program at least, we're testing on Instagram.
Oh,
so we're live on Instagram on the New Thought Media Network Instagram page right now, as well as Facebook, YouTube, and such. So if you happen to be on Instagram, take a look for us over there, or if you know somebody on that platform, let them know what we're doing. Because, well, the idea is to take this message and this philosophy and put it in as many places as we can and share the word as far and as wide as we can.
Yes. Well, and we need that, right? When we continue to look at the landscape and the environment that we're operating in and the culture that's being either built or torn down, depending on how you look at it, we begin to think about how do we want to foster a better way of communication, a better way of inclusion, so forth and so on, which is one of the hallmarks of our teachings is, how do we live a holistic life, meaning all parts are included and valued in what we do.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's a big part of what we're going to talk about today here, folks. So feel free to chime along, chat along, drop a comment in the comment box. Let us know where you're watching from, or add your questions or comments as we go along today, because one of the things that stuck out to me this week, and I guess I hadn't quite caught on to this, but it's been happening for a number of months now. But this week, Zoom, the business company, tech company, laid off their entire DEIB team. That was part of a larger layoff. It wasn't a massive layoff, but it was a larger layoff. And this was one of the teams that they cut the whole team, just gone. And a little bit of digging leads to the realization that this is now becoming a trend in Google, within other tech companies, Google, Meta, and others. Microsoft has been cutting their DEI or DEIB initiatives and teams, which kind of flies in the face of the promises they made all of us back in 2020.
Right. And so, you begin to look at the massive, and I'll dare say it, overreaction in some cases of a response to George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and forget the young lady's name in
Breonna Taylor.
Breonna Taylor, and others, right? So there was a overcorrection, right? As opposed to doing what's required, which is to let's sit down and really look at what the causes of these things. Let's do an overreaction and go way overboard and do all of this. And we needed that. But I think in some cases it wasn't as well thought out and looked at in terms of how we're going to integrate this thing called diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging into our organizations. And so they put them in, and then immediately the right start attacking it as being, to be equitable and inclusive. They talked about that being woke and that there was something wrong with that. And so right from the start, this whole idea of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging was undermined because they gave it a bad tag word as, oh, that's just them woke people trying to push a leftist agenda. And so now we see another overcorrection, right? Where
Yep.
they're starting to disband all of that altogether. And if anyone has ever driven a car in the rain, and they've overcorrected on either the right or the left, I would say you probably hit something on the right or the left if you just a guess. I could be wrong, and that's that's what's happening now, I
Yeah.
believe, and that's going to be a sad story if it starts to get in a whole lot of traction, and then then we'll be left with the aftermath to try to unravel all of that.
Yep. In today's day and age, we look to the tech companies to lead the way. And if this is the way they're leading, well, it might be time for new leadership in some of these companies. Because there have been studies and just a quick exploration of the subject myself this afternoon leads to a couple of studies where companies that embrace DEIB initiatives and are doing better financially. All right. Is that not the end result? You're cutting teams to save money. I got to look at it from that perspective that some of these companies are cutting the nose off to spite their face.
Yeah.
And we see where now it's been a rocky road within some of the New Thought communities because there's still very much an older perspective that isn't worried about the money, isn't worried about what business is doing, could care less where the tech companies are going, and questioning why we need these types of initiatives within the New Thought movement and the New Thought community. I know it's been kind of a rough road in a couple of these organizations so far.
Yeah. And, I think part of that is due to the fact that because of our moniker tag, if you will, a world that works for everyone or a world that works for all, which is now being more inclusive, if you will, it's taken for granted, I think, that, oh yeah, well, we're already that, if you will, right? We're trying to improve upon it, but we're already, honor all religions, all paths, but do we really, right? Is it lip service, or is it really looking at what it means to belong, what it really means to be inclusive? What is this thing you talk of called equality? And that's where I believe the real crux of the matter begins to seep in, is how are we defining? I did a quick search in terms of how one might define DEIB. I mean, this belonging piece says belonging goes beyond mere inclusion and emphasizes creating a sense of connection and community. It involves fostering, here's the good part, fostering an environment where individuals feel they are integral parts of the organization, contributing to its success, and are comfortable being their authentic self. Now, that you would think belonging might be the easiest one out of all of this.
You might think.
Yeah. I'm just speculating. I don't know, but I mean, that is a hard task for someone who doesn't understand the inclusion, diversity, and equity piece.
Yeah. And,
Right?
and straight up, right? For me, it's always been an evolving education.
Yes.
And at first, it was diversity and inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when somebody came along and said, well, wait a minute. And I'd been looking at how in spiritual organizations, how do we create equity rather than just quote equality? And now we add this into the equation. So we've got the sense of diversity. Okay, I can get that. And we're going to include everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to have to figure out how to create equity for all. And now we've added in the belonging piece on the end, which is that was something I was talking about back in 2010, 2011, 2012. How do we create that sense? Because I can go forward and say, I'm going to do this great idea so that everybody feels like they belong.
Yeah.
But I can't really control that because the belonging is within you. That's your bit. You've got to. So I got to create an environment that I hope is fostering that sense of belonging. But ultimately, one wrong slip, one wrong word, one misstep, and we can take away that sense of belonging really easily.
Yes.
And often, I think, inadvertently.
Yeah. And see, this whole idea of equity, I kind of it has a real linchpin into this belonging thing, right? Because we know, equity looks at, trying to ensure fairness and justice in treatment, right? But what often gets missed or overlooked or misconstrued is in that is a process of acknowledging that people have different starting points and it may require different levels of support to reach other levels or reach certain outcomes, right? And so the equity part also has to take into account addressing systemic and structural barriers that may put certain people, groups, or whatever at a disadvantage in being equity. Now, and I think the question too that has to be asked or clarified: equity does not mean equal, right?
Right.
A six, Robert, I know you about 6'1", 6'2".
Yep.
I'm 5'6". We're not equal in height or weight, right?
Yep.
But there can be equity in terms of how we are treated and how we are looked upon and how we are valued. And that's where the heart is.
And equity isn't just giving you a 6-foot box to stand on top of.
Exactly.
That's equality. That's figuring out or making me stand in a 6-foot hole. Yes. Right. That's creating equality. What we want to do is create equity. And you hit on it. You said our favorite words: systemic and structural barriers.
Yes.
Right. That's, to me, what equity is really all about, is how do we remove those systemic and structural barriers for you and I to have equal access to all of it.
Yes.
To jobs, to healthcare, to all the various aspects of life that are necessary. Well, again, here we are to create that world that works for all.
Yeah. And we've talked about this before, right? As new thought practitioners, if you will, and ministers, we talk about this inclusive metaphysical space, but at the same time, you often hear ministers and practitioners batterizing, if you will, Christianity.
Right.
or some other Islam in some cases where they don't, or Judaism, or Buddhism. Doesn't really matter. They we I've heard practitioners and ministers, and I try not to include myself in that, although I know I do, because we all get caught up. But to be conscious and aware that we can make new thought, which is supposed to be it's supposed to embody all of this DEIB stuff by definition, right?
Right.
But if
You shouldn't have
we
to have the conversation.
should be foregone
Really should.
conclusion. But when we begin to see how easy it is for someone to become evangelistic in their teaching of a thing or their presentation of a thing, as if it is the only thing that can achieve a goal, now we've stepped into a quagmire.
Yeah. I know that I've done this, and I strive not to, but I know that I have. We can create that barrier even in the reverse, as I have described some of the communities within Centers for Spiritual Living as a historically predominantly Black church.
Mm-hmm.
And we immediately create an idea in someone's head as to what that means by using those types of descriptors. And it's not with any malice, but it is with some ignorance, and therefore I stopped doing that. Right? I stopped biasing you to the experience you're going to have in advance by using such descriptors.
Well, you bring up a very good point there, because one of the things that's stated here is this whole thing about being authentic, right? But if I have to censor and over censor, and censorship is valid in a lot of reasons, right? But if I have to monitor and second guess everything I say, which begins to take away my authenticity, right? Now, a message that I may give in a more authentic way in terms of languages and everything begins to be drained, because I gotta think about, who am I going to offend with this word, or what line am I going to cross with this word, or at some point you get to the point, well, guess what? I ain't going to say nothing, because in this cancel culture, you can get canceled for the simplest of things. That has no malice, that has no, it may have some judgment, because we all have judgment, but it's not a malicious judgment, right? And so then what? And so now we're going to have people who've had life experience, who've had some education, and who's been part of an ongoing community and effort to create this fertile ground for human development, if you will, called DEIB. And they begin to say, I'm done. I don't want to get bastardized, or I don't want to get crucified, because I'm trying to say something and do something that's good, but you've misconstrued my words.
Right. We have miles to go. I'm not sure how I'm going to say that any better. So, however, I like the fact that in many ways we are doing the work, that it is more and more people. I mean, I hope that this raises within these organizations. I hope, and I trust, I'm going to change that. I trust there's a group within Zoom that is already looking at, okay, how do we keep this work going, even if the team dedicated to making it happen is no longer here. And in some of these other companies, I trust there are letter writing campaigns, and there are initiatives that are being brought forward to reinvigorate I don't see how anybody does any better by not having an awareness and therefore an expression of DEIB in their companies.
Yeah, and when those that do have it and are making or have had it before. Now I don't know if we can do this. I'm gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it. There's one company that I know of that has been involved in what has now become the DEIB, and that is having a HR department that valued diversity before it was anything else, in their hiring and including people from different backgrounds, so that they could begin to attract different talent with different viewpoints,
Yeah.
with different creativities, right? And we know if we get the same type of people from the same backgrounds and begin to try to be creative and innovative, the margin of where we're going is going to be very small because everybody's coming from the same perspective. To
Yeah.
get that enlarged or increased or more dynamic, you got to bring somebody who's going to look at it and say, that's crazy. Or, I don't see it that way. Or there's a whole bunch of people over here that think that that's not, not achievable or not desirable or whatever the case might be. So that is just one example of what diversity brings to any organization, corporate or religious.
Yep.
And we should be striving for that.
I didn't tell you this, but I promised myself we weren't going to talk about the Super Bowl today. But I'm going to change. But here we go, because it must have been during the game. And I'm not going to talk about the game, but there was an ad. And one of the ads, and it's one of the ads that's going to be easy to miss because it was for the NFL.
Yes.
And it was an ad with a young boy in Ghana.
Yes.
Now, I just returned from Kenya and from Africa and not far from Ghana, at least as far as being in North America is concerned. It's still pretty far on the continent away, but and met people from Ghana while I was there. So the immediacy of this commercial grabbed my attention, and it's a little boy throwing a football. But he's imagining himself playing against all the NFL players. And at first it's like, all right, whatever this is, it's the NFL. But as the commercial progresses and near the end, you realize, oh, this is a recruiting video. They're trying to inspire the youth of other continents to believe in a dream that they could make it in the NFL.
Right.
And this is a recruiting and come train with us and come trust us, because we can lift you out of where you are, and your dream to play in the NFL can be just as real as some big corn-fed white guy from Iowa.
Yeah.
No offense to anyone outside of Iowa or in Iowa.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
But it really struck me. And not until just here sitting putting this conversation together did I see that as, wow, there's a DEIB initiative right in front of my face. Now, I maybe don't always agree with the NFL or how they do things, but there's no question they've been very, very successful, and that they have a lot of money to spend to figure out what they're doing and what's going to serve the longevity of their organization, of their sport, and we are now talking about multi-billion-dollar type of company, and the NFL is investing maybe perhaps quietly, but nonetheless putting their money where their mouth is as far as DEIB is concerned.
Well, two things that you said there. One, to me, that was the best commercial of the Super Bowl. I don't know how long it was, but they brought in a lot of players, and he was running through the streets of Ghana and in compounds. I mean, it was really good. At first, if you didn't know what was going on, you didn't know who the commercial was for, because they didn't bring the NFL piece up for a while.
Until much later. And even the old guys in the street thinking the kid was crazy and his head's in the clouds, even if his body's here in Ghana. And yes.
And then, so that part was excellent. Then the other part that you said was equally important, if not more. Now, in football, if you were to say to someone, a corn-fed boy from Iowa is playing on the offensive line, it would be categorically acceptable because it has a meaning of this is a big kid on the line who you want to protect your quarterback or open a hole for your running back, right?
Yep.
But if you say that now, a big white corn-fed boy from from Iowa, you could step into a cancellation mode, right? With the term that for eons has been accepted and has a specific meaning when you say that, and it has a good meaning to say Iowa and Nebraska is another one, and some of those states in that region produce great offensive linemen.
Yep.
And so again, we bring up that point, and it shows how we have to, the vernacular of how we describe things becomes so tripped with traps, if you will,
yes,
that people begin to say, look, man, it's not, not worth it for me.
Yeah.
Not worth it.
Not worth risking the conversation to be authentic.
Yes.
And that authenticity leads us back into the belonging. Folks, before we get much deeper into this, we do need to take a quick break, say hello to some of our sponsors, let them say hello to you. But we've got a lot more, and I know this conversation's going somewhere deep. So stay with us, hit the like button, share button, subscribe button. Let your friends and family know what we're doing here on the New Thought Media Network. We'll be back in just a couple of moments with more of New Thought Today. Stay tuned.
It was a treat. It was a bonding. It was a celebration of men. It was a celebration of men who want to deepen in their spiritual awareness of one another, of themselves.
Welcome. We are a brotherhood of spiritually minded and open-hearted positive men. We invite you to join us.
And I came in knowing one person. I left knowing all of the group. And I feel like I came in knowing meeting strangers, but knowing and leaving brothers.
Come experience the New Thought Men's Gathering, Foundations 2024. Friday, March 15th through Sunday, March 17th. With Reverend Robert Brzezinski, Reverend Patrick Creelman, Reverend Eamon Duffy, and special guest musician Jamie Lula. In Vernonia, Oregon, at Camp Cedar Ridge. Learn more and register at www.newthoughtmens.community.
And we're back with more of New Thought Today here on the New Thought Media Network. Before the break, we've taken a pretty good size deep dive into the subject of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, DEIB, and how that really can support, and how I think, again, Z, it's been proven over and over again now that this really helps take a company forward. Yeah. And it seems completely idiotic for these tech companies to be backpedaling and cutting programs, cutting divisions, cutting teams that can only really take their company forward. Is there a place for DEIB in the future of big companies?
I think there will always be, and I think part of the challenge that these big companies or any company or any organization that and that's white or black, mind you, we won't stale it, if you will, is one of the keys, because I won't be absolutist, but one of the keys is this idea of implicit and unconscious bias.
Yeah.
Because how often have you seen or heard, somebody's trying to get someone to add to the team, whether it's a committee or whether it's an actual job, and you hear words like, well, he doesn't fit the bill, or I don't know if he'll work out in this culture, or those kinds of statements, which are driven in a large degree by implicit and unconscious bias. Someone comes in, someone comes in with a crazy hairdo, or someone comes in with a lot of tats or piercings or a different skin color or a different sexual orientation. One of the things is, I don't know if they'll fit the team. Now, all the qualifications are stellar. They're off the chart. But because of one of these biases has kicked in, either unconscious or implicit, they begin to shy away from maybe bringing the best person for the position onto the team.
Yep. And then we blame it on things like intuition and a gut feeling, and we use or misuse the emotional tools at our disposal to prove our bias.
Yes.
Rather than help to suspend that bias and take a deeper look at, okay, I say it all the time anymore. I may not agree with your politics, but I have to agree with the fact that you're human.
Yes. Yes. And see, and that steps right into this idea of inadequate resources. And by that, I mean, how do we effectively use our training dollars, our interactions with communities or individuals other than the predominant groups, black, white, whatever. And how do we, because we know we do have unlimited resources, but in certain situations, we don't have all the resources available at that specific time, and we may be dealing with a limited resource. How do we become the best stewards of these resources to get the maximum amount of results is what we're dealing with. And, a lot of companies started having great seminars about defining what some of these terms are, but that thing probably should have been had once. I mean, how long does it take you to understand what equity, belonging, inclusion, and diversity means? I mean, okay, we can take a whole day, clarify that. Now it's hard work, right? Put me in the room with the other, whoever the other is, and we need to work some things out.
Right.
We need to understand my implicit biases, your implicit biases, unconscious bias, and then begin to say, okay, how do we begin to develop, back to this whole thing of communication, how do we begin to develop communication styles and languages to be able to be frustrated and talk about it with not checking out, to be able to come from different perspectives, but be able to blend those ideas together to get a grander view than either one of us could have gotten individually. Right. And this is hard work.
Yep. As you're saying that, I've reflected, and it shines back into my mind that sometimes the best learning opportunities is the person that has up to then been afraid to admit they don't understand what the heck is going on here. I don't get this. I don't, this language is foreign to me. I don't understand why this is a big deal. And that can be a very scary place.
Yes.
In any organization. Yes. And let's move that into our organizations in churches.
Yes.
It can be a very scary place to say, I don't get this. And that isn't my experience, and that's not how it's worked for me. And I need some help getting to a different understanding And I think that is in some way what makes it seem like these are such rocky roads to travel.
Exactly. And when you go to a spiritual community perspective, right, where there's a certain communal vibe, if you will, that's there, and so there's a donation pattern established. If you start bringing in, the fear is anyway that if I start changing or bringing in people other than, right,
Mhm.
my donations are going to dry up, my tithing is going to dry up. And so now we have the tail wagging the dog, if you will, because the spiritual community, the church, the mosque, the synagogue are supposed to be set up to serve the people.
Yeah.
All the people, by the people, for the people, right? Now, if we start having that go down to a few people, potentially you could wind up in the same situation we have now politically, where we have a few people representing these parties that controlling things, and it creates a slippery slope.
A very slippery slope. Well, and it's really easy. Like, I heard something today in a meeting, and someone shared that they understood they were in a spiritual community, and there was some, let's call it conflict, disagreements, misunderstandings, miscommunications. And the person was very clear that they understand it's a people thing. It's not the philosophy. And in that, what they were sharing is they were so excited because they had now found a new or different spiritual community where it off the front end, everything's jiving and everything's grooving and the vibe is good again. And I feel safe digging into the philosophy, rather than being concerned with just the people. But it's real easy for someone to slip away, to just check out, especially if they're not fully invested yet, to walk in the door and hear something that's a little maybe off the cuff, or somebody says something a little wrong, or someone's struggling with a concept, to hear something and say, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And just slip away. And as spiritual leaders, we may not even have had a chance to get into the conversation. We might see them a few times and not quite get to that deeper conversation before they're slipping off and running somewhere else, because someone like me maybe stuck their foot in their mouth trying to learn this stuff.
Right. And there goes the point that you made earlier about the evolution of life, really, right? Because we started out with this whole process of DEIB with just diversity. We need a diverse workforce to represent all of the people, to address some of the needs of all of the people, so we can attract a broader client base. And then it became diversity and inclusion. Well, we may be speaking to these people, but we're not bringing them in, or whatever that may be. So we have to have not only diversity, but they have to be included in the decision making, in the creativity. And then it moved to equity. That, okay, it's not enough just to have a diverse and inclusive. They have to have some equity in making decisions and speaking for themselves, and starting at, on the same starting line, not somebody starting 20 yards or 30 yards ahead. And then that began to take a little small foothold, but then I still felt alienated, right? Because if I come in and I'm a black guy, and I can't be as smart as a white guy, and I can't be as creative as a white guy, and then I come in and they see the work, but they don't want to get rid of the work because they want that results. But then they make me feel like I don't belong, right? I don't fit in, and so eventually something gives, right?
Yeah.
And just by looking at the field itself, it has evolved over time as people got more comfortable, more educated. And so that will continue ad infinitum as long as we keep creating new cultures and new kids and new people to go through this process. We have to be diligent. It's like sailing a boat. if you sail in a boat, you have to pay attention to the winds and shift your sail as the wind changes. You can't set a dead beat on one thing, and no matter what happens to the wind, you keep going in that direction, you're gonna break your sail.
Right. We still have miles to go. Well, and you know what jumps into my head is, okay, so how do we do this at the church level? How do we do this at the community level, but not make it some big, huge, hey, we're launching a DEIB group and community, and you know what? You're the black guy. So how about if you lead that up, because you obviously know more about it than anybody, and how, like, what are some things we can do to foster this sense to well, and I'm going to maybe answer my own question, to create the environment that's inviting, that is inclusive, that does reflect the diversity that we understand, even if we haven't been able to outpicture it yet.
Yeah, that is, you know, I remember back when I first started becoming interested in New Thought and religious science specifically, and I would go, and having come up in a Christian Southern Baptist Methodist kind of a background, and I'm used to going to hear music that is like soul stirring, that is either jubilation or takes me to tears, because I got to really think about some stuff that I may have not done as well, or take me to some places that may hurt. And then I come in and I hear operatic Broadway plays, and I'm like, I don't know if that's working for me.
Right.
I'm not, I didn't come here to be necessarily entertained, although all music is entertaining, but I did come here to have some music or some songs or whatever that will make me be more introspective, to make me be more reflective of my life and how I relate to others and how I relate to the divine. And not that any other songs can't do that, but if you're trying to be inclusive and you're trying to be diverse and track other people from different backgrounds, one of the, I always heard that, people come to church, at least in the black church, people come to church for the music. They'll stay for the message, right? And I think it's ubiquitous. If you have a musical ministry in your organization, that people come, they want to come in and for those who like operatic or classical music or Broadway music, they come for that and they'll stay for the message. So how do we begin to take that as an example and intertwine these things, mix them so that there's some contrast and there's some other things that attract people of this diverse background that we're looking for?
So that means we have a hip hop service at noon and a classic music and a classical operatic at 8 a.m. and we figure out when each of the musical. I like this idea.
And again, we're gonna go back to the Super Bowl. We wasn't going there, but now we're there.
Okay.
we look at we look at what Beyonce did at the end of the commercial. She did the commercial, and then she announced that her next album, Act 2, if you will, is going to be a country music display.
Right.
And right away, Texas Hold'em, and I forget what the other one was, shot to #1 immediately.
Yeah.
And we know for it to go to #1, it wasn't all black people buying a country music. Now there was surely some Queen Bee followers who did that, but I'm sure there's some country art aficionados, if you will, or enthusiasts who are not black that heard that and said, "Ooh, because it's country.
We got to see if this black girl could do country or not."
Exactly.
Right? I'm sure they sold some albums, some songs on that.
Yes.
So
Yes. And it's taking a page from, I remember when Ray Charles made a country western, and it like went wildfire because country you know, we in the black community, we would always say country music is white folks blues, right? So it's
Okay.
just
Yeah.
blues set out in a white vernacular and in that. So the mixing and matching is very analogous because it's the same thing, just in a different preview.
Just in a slightly different packaging. So
Yeah, yeah.
okay, so wow. Black folk belong in the country music scene too.
Without a doubt.
Create belonging within that music scene, which in some regards has long been considered a home to the white supremacists.
Yes.
Right. Let's
Yes.
not skip over that point that,
Yes.
you know, for many, all right, one of my implicit biases is if it's too country, it's can often be too white as well.
Yes. Yes.
So to bring some to bring some more color to the genre.
And look at what happened during the Grammys. I forget the young man's name who took Tracy Chapman's song,
Oh
more
yes.
of a folk kind of bluesy kind of rock thing, and turned it country and invited her to sing with him and her stuff went right out the top. Everybody loved that song. That's why it was in the Grammys. Because he took a song that was not theoretically in that genre, but was able to flip it and become known and recognized for that.
Yep, exactly. Which means it's working.
Yes. Yes.
If Beyonce gets it, if Tracy Chapman's getting it, if the country artists are getting it, that means it's working. So the DEIB is happening. We're just looking at perhaps in the wrong directions for leadership because it's not happening in the tech world. It's not happening in the high paying corporate white collar jobs. We got to find a better term for that. But it is happening in the high paying music industry and let's perhaps say in the blue collar jobs as well.
Most definitely. Most definitely. And so then, you know, we get to that idea of, you know, art imitating life or life imitating art, right? Now we stepped into a whole nother one, right? And we begin to look at in music or art, specifically in music, the diversity and the relationships built between black, white, and other artists. And I'll just put it in a stark black and white term. But, you know, you throw in any sexual orientation, culture, you know, think about how big world music is now, right? And before it was a very small genre, so it became a world music. And now you see hip hop embracing Latin music and R&B embracing African music and cross-pollinating everywhere, because at that level of display and languaging and understanding, when we come in this room to make music, if you can play the piano, I don't care if you have no legs, if you're purple, does not matter. If you can lay down the licks on the piano, come on in the room. Let's get busy. Let's make this thing happen. And that's how we have to begin to be in our spiritual communities and our, dare say, political communities, when we're looking at the idea of making something that's moving, making something that's going to inspire people to get up and be servants and to share their talents, whether they are getting paid for it or not, in certain cases, right? And begin to create this world that works for all. Or we're going to be doing a whole lot of lip service and getting a lot of token people in some high positions to make it look like we're doing something, when in actuality, we ain't doing nothing.
I don't want to give politics that much credit yet. But I want to stay with the music piece for a minute, because I look back on this and we celebrated David Bowie for his gender bending, cross-dressing, whatever you want to call it. And now it would be an uproar if David Bowie were still alive and showed up on stage wearing a skin-tight bodysuit.
Yeah.
right?
Who was married to an African woman, by the way.
Yes. No, but and Mick Jagger has said this in interviews and had an affair with Mick Jagger, right? And nobody blinked an eye when Mick Jagger says that he slept with David Bowie, right? Rock stars, no problem. Punk, all kinds of music genres where this has been the norm in many ways, where, and I want to agree with the point you were making, that if you can make good music, I really don't, people really don't care because the music moves them more than anything.
Yeah. And just to that point real quick, when you look at the inclusion, right, hip hop came out, right? And, it was a black, black, but then you see Eminem, white guy from Detroit. Then you see Justin Bieber. Then you see Justin Timberlake. Because they could come in and play, right? Back in the jazz days, they could come in and swing. They said, look, and they understood the culture at varying degrees. They said, look, you understand enough and you're definitely talented enough. Come on, let's cross some lines and make some things happen. Now, some people got mad, of course, and that's always going to be the case when you start expanding the boundaries and breaking down these barriers. But the end result is, nobody's going to deny that Eminem can't rap. Nobody.
Yeah. Even if you don't like what he's rapping about, you got to admit, my point earlier, I may not like what you're doing with music, but I got to admit you're human and you're doing the job. Yep.
And that's what we have to begin to do in our religious, in our social, in our spiritual, in our communal environments, where we begin to say, look, we're trying to make some music here, if you will. And I'm not really concerned the package of the musician. What I'm concerned about is, can the musician play? Can they read the music? Can they play the notes?
Does it move the people?
Does it move the people?
Does it make you want to move? And as you're saying this, I'm reflecting upon how many times over the last 20 years someone is secretly came up to me and pulled me aside and said, what you said just isn't right. You can't say that in a prayer. You can't say that in a prayer. You can't do it. You got to go. You can't talk about it that way. You got to do about it this way. And I've had that happen with so many times, coming off at various stages across this country, where somebody pulls me aside and tells me I can't say it that way. And it's like, but that's what makes me move. And that's what makes people move. And it even moved you to tell me I was wrong, but it moved you. So how could it be wrong?
Yeah. And if the prayer is the same prayer every time, I'm going to get sick of that prayer, and I'm going to just actually tune that out.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Because every situation that I'm praying for, whether it's for help, celebration, joy, needs, or whatever, they're different situations. So I can't pray the same for everything or every time, because the situation is different. And the person I am today ain't going to be the person I am Sunday when I say a prayer at the end of the service.
Yep, exactly. Folks, we do need to take another quick break and let some more sponsors say hello and thank you. But we've got our final thoughts coming up right after this. So please don't go away. Stay with us. We'll be back with more New Thought Today in just a moment. Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity, Kitchener. Unity Spiritual Center, Ottawa. Om Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center. Begin Within Ministries. Center for Spiritual Living, North Jersey. Unity of Savannah. And the Center for Spiritual Living, Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for being part of the New Thought Media Network. Please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you to all of our organizational sponsors and individual donors. If you'd like to become part of the financial family here at the New Thought Media Network, please head on over to our website, ntmedia.org. Click on the donate button, make it a monthly donation, and we'll include your name on our next version of our thank you video. Or if you're an organization, you'd like more information, just reach out, info@ntmedia.org. All right, Zeke. So I think we have kind of covered the gambit, and I love the fact that at the end of the day, it all comes back to good music.
Yes.
If you got good music, you're all right.
Yes. Jazz, blues, R&B, rock and roll, country, symphonic, operatic, Broadway. It's all good.
It's all good. Exactly. All right. Any final thoughts for us today?
Well, I guess my one final thought would be that, this DEIB thing, regardless to where it sits, is a multifaceted and ongoing journey requiring commitment, collaboration, and a holistic approach. And so when we can begin to do that, get rid of our biases, conscious or unconscious, implicit or implicit, and begin to really have at the key or the heart of the matter is, how do we include everybody, give and allow them to be valued? I think we're going to be moving in the right direction and things are going to work themselves out.
Amen. Yes, yes, yes. And the thing that strikes me the most today is if the leaders won't lead, the people will.
Yeah.
And if you're in a company that's cutting back on their DEIB programs, start your own. Start talking about it. If you're in a spiritual organization that's wondering, how do we embrace these principles and how do we help to demonstrate our commitment to these ideals, then be a part of that. And there are more than enough resources out there. There's more than enough opportunity out there. We don't have to follow the tech companies. We can chart the course, and in those words of Margaret Mead, nothing will ever change the world like a group of committed individuals. So let's be committed to what it is we want to see and be committed to creating a world that works for all.
Yes. Amen.
Amen. All right, we're out of here for now. We want to thank you for being with us, folks, here on the New Thought Media Network and on New Thought Today. On behalf of myself and Reverend Elzia, we'll be back next week. Until then, we wish you peace and richest blessings. Bye now.